without Christianity, our world is going to hell. They need us. And so we've got to find a way to incorporate our issue with our interest.
Can I ask a question at this point? Could we agree that they need us whether we convert them or not?
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine what our world would be like without Christians, whether we convert them or not.
I lose track of that. I think they need us whether we convert them or not.
Do you remember the story about Liberty, Missouri?
No.
Liberal, Missouri. Sorry. Liberal, Missouri.
Yes.
Liberal, Missouri, years ago, wanted to create a town. The people who went there wanted to create a town without God. And after a period of time without God in the town, even the profound atheists left because they couldn't put up with how corrupt it was. And so it's like our world needs us. They need us to be the light. Whether they obey the gospel or not, they still need us. But here's where this really comes down to. When we think about the idea of passion and being passionate about the direction of where we're going, it's about this. You remember the movie The Passion of the Christ? The word passion in the English language comes to us from a Latin word that means to suffer. And I really do my best to try to emphasize up front because it's the way we normally think about the idea of passion, about enthusiasm and excitement and all of those components. And so we are enthusiastic and excited and all of those things. But passion is not just about enthusiasm. Passion, especially when it comes to leadership, is about sacrifice. It's about what are we willing to suffer in order to achieve the vision. What are we willing to commit our life to do? What are we willing to give up in order to take the cause of Christ to the world around us? You see, that's what passion is really all about. Yes, we need to be excited and we need to be enthused about the task before us, and we need to take that issue into our interest-based passions, and we need to do that. But it really comes down to this. It's what are we willing to sacrifice? So what do we need to know about the idea of sacrifice? Martin Luther King Jr. made this statement, and I tell you, it haunts me. Because he said, if a man has not discovered something he will die for, he isn't fit to live. Now think about that. Do you remember when Peter told Jesus, I'm willing to lay down my life for you? Jesus said, I'm going away. Where I'm going, you cannot come now. Where are you going? He wanted to know. He was willing to go with him. He said, I'm willing to lay down my life for you. And you remember what Jesus asked him? Will you lay down your life for me? Now, I don't ever ask that question for a show of hands. Because the fact that you've given up a Saturday morning and afternoon to come here and listen to me and to talk about this subject tells me, at least to some degree, that if I were to ask the question, there's not a person in this room that wouldn't raise their hand and say, I'm willing to die for Christ. See, I don't think that's the question. I think the question we need to be asking is, will we live for Him? Because if we're not willing to live for Him, we'd never be willing to die for Him, whether we raised our hand or not. And if we're going to live for Him, then it's going to require sacrifice. And so what we need to know about sacrifice when it comes to leadership begins right there. In his book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, John Maxwell talks about the law of sacrifice. And in that, he talks about the fact that there is no success without it. Success comes or is built upon the foundation of sacrifice. People are willing to make a sacrifice. When you think about the military in our country, I mean, we have to be thankful for the willingness on their part to serve in areas that can cost them their life. And the generations before us that have done that in previous wars, the success we enjoy in this country is built upon their sacrifice. And we think about leadership in general. To lead means sacrifice. I mean, in fact, if you go back and study the history of the word leader, It has to do with making a sacrifice. The idea of being a leader means that we're going to surrender the right to think about ourselves. And that's a hard thought to really digest, because I don't know how many times I've heard people say, what about me? When do I get the opportunity for people to serve me? And the minute me comes into the equation, we're already on a decline. Our influence is declining. It's not about me. It's about Him. Earlier, the word that was used, I think a couple of different tables used the word example. I see example back there in one of them. I think there was another one that used example, or at least used example in their definition. Oh, there it is. Okay. Have you ever thought about John chapter 13? And you remember the context where Jesus began to wash the disciples' feet? Do you remember when He got up from washing their feet and He said, do you know what I've done to you? It was obvious they didn't know. But He's telling them, you call me teacher and Lord, and I am. If I then, your Lord, if I'm your teacher, wash your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. And the only place in Scripture, the only time that Jesus ever said, I've given you an example that you should do as I have done to you, the only time, had nothing to do with preaching or teaching. It had nothing to do with parenting. It had nothing to do with marital relationships. It had to do with the foundation for every area of our life, and certainly incorporating leadership. The example was being a servant. That's really what it's all about. And if we're going to lead, then it's going to be on the basis of our serving the better good of others. It's what's best for them. And when people know that our life is about doing what's best for them, they will follow us to the grave.
I saw it written, we stand tallest when we stoop to help others.
Oh, yeah. That is so true. And to think that here's the Lord, the Creator of the universe, stooping to wash the feet of even the one who would betray Him, one who would deny Him, and all who would flee from Him in His moment of need. Wow. The higher the level, the greater the sacrifice. When it comes to leadership, the higher we go in leadership, the greater the sacrifice. I'm still baffled that anybody would want to be the president of any country. Seriously. Because when you get to that point in leadership, whether people like you or not, you've got to make some sacrifice. You sacrifice a lot to be in that kind of position. And then, of course, we need to be careful about developing the destination disease. Students would come through Bear Valley and we'd tell them, for a year and 3 quarters, you need to beware of your last quarter here. You get the senioritis. The senioritis means, I've made it. I've got to the end of this thing. They kind of let down. They don't do as good a quality of work because all they can do is think about when they get out. Senioritis is tough. And we had one student. I don't know what his intent was in saying it, but what he said was significant. He was so tired of studying. He said, I'm not even going to pick my Bible up for at least a month when he graduated. We need to be careful about reaching a destination disease. When we get to a point in leadership, we need to never stop learning. Even as the highest position of any leadership on earth, and that is elder. There is no greater position of leadership on this earth, physical or spiritual, than serving as an elder. But that's not the end. That's not the destination. We have to continue to learn, to grow, to serve. Now, what I want us to do when we think about developing the mind of sacrifice It involves the ability to see the need that exists. We have to recognize the need within the church that we've talked about already. We have to recognize the need that exists in our culture. We have to recognize and see the need. Jesus was able to see the need. And He asked us to beseech the Lord of harvest to send forth workers into a harvest. He recognized the need. Sheep without a shepherd. We need to see the need. We need to know the value of the gift. You ever thought about what Jesus gave people? Think about what Jesus gave people. He didn't give them money. He didn't give them clothes. He gave them freedom from the tyranny of Pharisaical oppression. He gave them forgiveness. He gave them acceptance. He gave them understanding. We need to know the value of what it is we offer people. Because when we know the value of the gift, it makes all the difference in how people receive it. And of course, considering the greater good. Now, this exercise that I want us to do, we're not going to do in groups as it's going to say. We got about 5 minutes here before we take our next break. What I want us to do is just openly have a discussion for about 5 minutes. And here's what I want us to talk about. I want us to talk about what is it, if we were going to make a list, and you can make the list on your sheet of paper there, but what is it that leaders are going to give up? What do they have to sacrifice in order to lead people? Time. Family. Family time. Say. Pride. Boy, pride's a powerful thing we have to give up.
Ego.
Ignorance.
Yeah, maybe.
They got to be a learner.
Well, it's not so much, I wasn't thinking about that example. I was thinking the example of more sometimes ignorance is bliss. If you don't know about necessarily all of the troubles and trials of those around you, it's not weighing you down.
Oh, good.
Weighed down by it.
Very good. Yeah. Weighed down by the responsibility. Very good.
I think I ties it a little bit because I think leaders have to learn to seek the best knowledge. So it's not always about what they know or what they think should be done.
Good.
They have to be able to seek the best knowledge.
Very good.
That's
Yeah.
give up traditions.
Ooh, that's a tough one, isn't it? We are a tradition-bound people in a lot of ways. It's hard to give that up. Safety. You know, creating a safe environment for the church is a tough thing.
It's dangerous.
And it is dangerous. And being able to give that, you have to give that up in order to lead people. You put yourself in danger to do that. Excuse me.
Give up self.
Self.
That's what I was going to say. As a former elder, you give up your personal life.
Wow, that's true. That's a hard thing, isn't it? And it's those kind of things that cause a lot of men not to serve. They don't want to serve because they don't want to do that.
When you get a call, you don't think, well, who can I get to do that? You jump up and go.
Yeah.
Privacy.
Boy. Growing up a preacher's kid, and I know it's the same for the elders' kids, I mean, your family's under a microscope. Everything they do is criticized or at least in some way critiqued under the standard that's higher than everybody else is critiqued under. And that, you give up privacy in those regards. Your home life doesn't become your home life, it becomes everybody's life. And so that can be very challenging.
On this vein of thought, I think one of the false things that we have decided that we need to give up when we accept leadership is meaningful relationship within the church.
Ooh, yeah, that's very good.
And that just separates us from our flock instead of draws us closer to it.
Absolutely.
But it's pretty prevalent.
Are you guys familiar with Glenn Colley? Glenn Colley wrote a book entitled Shepherds Smell Like Sheep. I think's the name of it.
They smell like shit.
Yeah, they smell like sheep. You can't do that if you're away from the sheep.
No.
If you're staying in the palace or the glass house, you don't smell like sheep. You got to smell like sheep. So,
Was that Lynn Anderson?
Yeah, it was Lynn Anderson.
was it Lynn Anderson, not Glenn Colley?
My name's
They
Anderson,
smell like
Bob, so
sheep.
that was a little bit.
Okay, well, thanks. I appreciate you. I appreciate the correction.
I knew that one.
Maybe it was because I heard Glenn Colley speak on the subject. I don't remember him. It could have been that. But anyway, yeah, they smell like sheep.
We give up a lot of our energy and emotion because we spend so much of it on individuals who need it.
Yeah. And you know, as much as I don't like to say this, it's really true that there are so many people that just, they emotionally are draining because they come to the elders with the challenges in their life, and they're legitimate, and they are hurting. They need healing. But what happens is far too often we allow the greater segment of the church that's that way to just drain the elders, and they don't ever get that building up. They don't ever get that holding them in high esteem and high regard, and other people in the congregation to encourage them and say, we are proud of the job you're doing, and we're here to help you. We want to support you, and those kind of things. And it really is challenging. It's very draining.
That's going back to what was said earlier. You are when you volunteer to lead, because that's what we're doing. You know, we're choosing to. I'm going to put myself out there. You are effectively volunteering to see people at their worst.
Yeah.
I mean, you're saying, don't bring me your best. Bring me what you don't want anybody else to see.
Yeah. Very good.
And you give up anonymity,
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
so you're open to criticism like you wouldn't be.
Yeah. Very true. Very good. Anything else? I guess it comes down to really asking the question. When we think about everything that's been said, and I know there's more, we could probably spend a lot more time talking about all of the various areas that we have to sacrifice when it comes to leadership, but it really comes down to asking the question. What is the question?
Are you willing?
Are you willing? Are you and I willing to make the sacrifice? Many aren't. And I understand. I understand why. But are we willing? The church needs men who are willing to make that sacrifice. But what we as the church needs to do is we need to be involved in helping hold their hands up and support them and encourage them in that decision. Because when somebody has the courage to take on that kind of leadership, they need support. They need someone that's going to be there to help them and to keep them focused on that task. It's needed. All right, we're going to take a break, about 10, 12 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap up this last session this afternoon. Thank you guys for all that you're contributing to this conversation.